Yo, all right, but y'all know what's going on by the title of the video. But today we are gonna be reading for 15 minutes. I got this book from my local library. It's called "Driving the Green Book: A Road Trip Through the Living History of Black Resistance" by Alvin Hall. Real quick, I think that the Green Book is the black version of the Yellow Book. If you don't know what the Yellow Book is, it's like this book of it's this list of businesses. I believe it was local, so like you go to like I don't know where you would go, but it would make sense to like go to the library or like a local store. You could get a little Yellow Book, and I believe that it was local. It could have been possibly state to state. I was born in '01, so I seen them, never used them because we got these things called phones now. And so this is the black version of the Yellow Book. It's the Green Book, and this dude named Alvin Hall, I guess he basically he took a road trip using the Green Book. So we finna read for 15 minutes, and I got this timer going for 16 minutes so I can get the full 15. So let's get into it, man. Today, this bookmark is Smoke Justice. It's a Smoke Justice gift card holder. Smoke Justice is a restaurant in northern Kentucky. If you want to go try it out, it's pretty good. Chapter 1 is titled. Well, probably should read the introduction first, huh? I'll read the introduction later. Let's read the introduction. Well, we're going to read every page. How about that? Because it has some quotes in the beginning. So, all right, man, here we go. 10 seconds until the 15, so we cool on the extras. That black people have had to create mechanisms for survival is an indictment of America, but it is also a testament to people of color that we have found ways to cope and survive and navigate this incredibly unfair and complex world. The Green Book and a lot of other things like it were the tools that people used to navigate. Brian Stevenson, lawyer and founder of the Equal Justice Initiative. Things like the Green Book. Let's see, hold on, I don't want to do this. Yeah, like this. Things like the Green Book tell us there's somebody in my corner, somebody who wants to make sure I safely get to my destination. I think that's a metaphor for life. We want to help people safely through life. T. Mary King, community organizer, facilitator, and trainer in Birmingham, Alabama. All right, introduction. You would think that my journey with the Negro Motorist Green Book would have begun in an automobile. In fact, it began in a plane. The year was 2015. I was flying to London, and as I often do, had brought along a stack of magazines to pass the time. One article about road trips around the U.S. referred in passing to the Negro Motorist Green Book. As far as I remember, it probably mentioned that the travel guide had been used by black travelers during segregation, but I don't recall the word segregation itself being used. My interest was immediately piqued. I had never heard of the publication. That's not surprising considering that I grew up in the 1950s and 1960s, dirt poor, living on land by family owns in the rural Florida panhandle. The phrase dirt poor means we possessed only that partial or parcel of land that we lived on, growing and raising most of what we ate. Most black people in the area lived along sandy, unpaved roads that wove through scrub pine forest with a few live oak trees draped with hanging moss. Lots of raccoons, possum, squirrels, snakes, birds, and insects lived in the underbush. The landscape was not verdant. It always looked slightly dry, but it was always humid because the area was near the Gulf of Mexico. We did not own a car. We could not afford one. We never traveled for vacations or other leisure activities. We only traveled to visit relatives, usually being driven by a family friend who owned a car, to places we could reach between sunrise and sunset. No one I knew drove overnight, so my family would have had no need for the Negro Motorist Green Book. Nonetheless, the publication's name and the article's brief description captured my imagination. I resolved to find out more. Back in New York, after my work in London, I began my search by going to the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, located in Harlem and part of the New York Public Library. The Schomburg, I'm probably saying this wrong. The Schomburg, as it is widely known, is America's premier archive for African American history. It contains a remarkable and growing trove of documents and artifacts about crucial, often little known or overlooked histories, facts, and stories about Black Americans and their lives. Important for my purpose, and unlike any other archive I know, its collective of the publication I was looking for is almost complete. It lacks only one of the editions of the Green Book, which was published annually, except when publication was temporarily suspended during World War II from 1936 to 1967. Yeah, that's a long time. There, while I sat in the conference room in the rare books section, Associate Chief Librarian Maria Myra. I'm gonna go with Myra Liriano, Liriano, Mira, bro, brought me copies that I could hold in my hands and examine at leisure. This is no longer possible. The paper they were printed, the paper, this is no longer possible. The paper they were printed on has become too fragile. What I saw and read were listings of largely black-owned enterprises, businesses that welcome black travelers in city after city, in town after town across the U.S. I was amazed. Tallahassee, Florida, the nearest large city to where I grew up, was one of the first places I checked. Much to my surprise, I saw a listing for a lodging that I had never heard of, the Abner, Virginia Motel, on a street I knew well, Railroad Avenue. My relatives and I must have gone by it many times when going to Tallahassee to buy groceries or to see a doctor, but not knowing its significance, I never paid any attention to the place. As I turned the pages of the Green Book, pursuing listings in other cities where I had lived or visited, scanning articles featuring major U.S. vacation destinations, reading tips about how to prepare your car for a trip, and even advice about how to dress to project a respectable image while driving in your car. One question echoed repeatedly through my mind: why had I never heard of this publication? Then, just as I was beginning my research at the Schomburg in late 2015, I got an email from Jeremy Grange, a producer of radio programs at BBC Wales. In what seems a striking coincidence, he asked whether I would be interested in working with him as a presenter called Host in America on a documentary about the Negro motorist Green Book for BBC Radio 4. Without hesitation, I said yes. At the time, almost none of my friends in New York and other U.S. cities had heard of the publication. The, the fact that Jeremy, a BBC producer living and working in Wales and not the U.S., had also came across the mention of the Green Book in an article and thought it would serve as the basis for an interesting, informative documentary made the opportunity feel profoundly faded. A quotation by James Baldwin kept coming to mind. A journey is a journey is called that because you cannot know what you will discover on that journey, what you will do with what you find, or what you find will do to you. I can't tell I can't tell you the number of times I thought of these wise words and how persistent they proved to be in the journey ahead. I could not have known then that my exploration of the Negro Motorist Green Book would include two road trips. The first one, 5 days in the spring of 2015, started in Tallahassee, Florida, and ended in Ferguson, Missouri. Owned by Jeremy Grange, its purpose was to produce the 38-minute radio documentary. He and I conceived of the program as traveling not just through space, but through time as well. My lifetime, from where I grew up in the Jim Crow South, where laws severely limited the rights of black people, as well as the social interaction between black and white people, to the monumentous contemporary events at the time in Ferguson. Jeremy, photographer Jonathan Calm, and I followed part of what is called the United States Civil Rights Trail, which links those cities primarily in the South, in which African American activists and supporters from all ethnic, religious, and racial backgrounds marched, protested, and endured personal danger, sometimes death, during the 1950s and 1960s to fight for the right to vote, for racial equality, for social reform, and for fair legal treatment in all parts of life in the United States. We stopped in Birmingham and Selma, Alabama, Jackson, Mississippi, Memphis, Tennessee, and finally Ferguson, Missouri. We visited the locations of once fancy and well-known hotels, tourist homes, restaurants, eateries, movie houses, and nightclubs that have been listed in the Green Book. We sought out and talked to people who generously recounted their stories of driving in the United States during the time when this guide and others like it were not just conveniences, but life-saving travel necessities. Our documentary, simply titled The Green Book, aired on BBC Radio 4 in November 2016. The second road trip, 12 days in June 2019, started in Detroit, Michigan, and ended in New Orleans, Louisiana. His purpose was to create my 10-episode podcast series, Driving the Green Book, and was largely organized by Byfield producer Kimi Aladasui. This trip was inspired in part by an exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City in 2015 called One Way Ticket, Jacob Lawrence's Migration Series, and other visions of the Great Movement North. Lawrence's Ambition, deeply affected series consists of 60 tempera one-panel paintings. Collectively, they vividly captured the shared hardships and disappointments African Americans experienced during the Great Migration, the period between 1910 and 1970, when more than 6 million black people left the rural South and moved north and west for the better opportunities. Terrorism sparked that transit, especially the drowning, burning, and lynching of black men, women, and even families in the South. But the travelers also headed north in pursuit of better lives and new growing industries such as automobile manufacturing. The Great Migration remains the largest demographic shift in U.S. history. The introduction to the one-way ticket exhibition featured as featured a fascinating infographic showing how significantly the African American population had increased in seven northern cities: Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit, New York, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and St. Louis. The largest increase in those seven cities was in Detroit, whose African American population increased from 1.2% in 1910 to 43.7% in 1970. The auto industry served as a magnet for residents from Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, the Florida Panhandle, and Louisiana. But despite their settling in Detroit, they left a part of their hearts back home. Many of these people would want and need to return to the South to visit relatives, and their relatives in the South would travel up north to visit them to see their new lives. This is why publications like the Green Book were crucial at the moment in history. Black travelers needed to know where it was safe to stop for even the most essential services, such as buying gasoline. So associate producer Janae Woods Weber and I, accompanied by field producer Kimmy, took a more than 2,000-mile road trip from Detroit to New Orleans, with side trips to cities and towns along the way that would have been destinations for many travelers from the Motor City. Our goal on this trip, as it had been with the first, was to find people along the route who had used or heard of the Green Book and who patronized or knew of the locations, establishments, and businesses in the travel guide. All right, I'm gonna finish this intro because it's only like one more. There's only one more page left, and I mean, I can read for like 20 minutes instead of 15. So the title of this is obviously reading for 20 minutes or something like that. Uh, the Green Book and or hold on, patronized or did I have this like this? See this one I'm talking, but just vibe out to him. Knew of the locations, establishments, and businesses listed in the travel guide. We wanted a direct link to that history. The release of the movie Green Book in September 2018 unexpectedly increased my motivation and strengthened my resolve. Uh, I attended a screening of it in New York that was followed by a moderated talk with the director, producers, and principal actors. The moderator asked each a simple question: had you heard of the Green Book before doing the movie? All said no. I was surprised, although I probably should not have been. Although the movie is called Green Book, it this it decidedly it decidedly is not about the travel guide. In fact, the publication is shown or referenced only 3 or 4 times. Viewers are left thinking that it is like a secret guide used by black people. I knew that no one involved in the movie had investigated the accommodations available to an entertainer like pianist Don Shirley in the early 1960s when I saw the types of places in which he stayed in several scenes. Those choices played to stereotypes of where Shirley, Duke Ellington, Count Basie, I don't know, Ella Fitzgerald, and Sarah Vaughan would have stayed. In conversations, I have become aware that people equate the actual Green Book with a few scenes in a movie of blatant racism during Shirley's concert tour that is the central plot device for the story. These scenes hint lightly at why the Green Book was described as an essential publication. Moviegoers get no sense of the breadth and businesses in the state by state, city by city listings in the guide. The movie story, or wait, the movie stories arclets the viewer feel good about knowing the name Green Book, but prompts little motivation to further explore and understand the history that necessitated the guide. The afterglow of the feel good buddy movie is what people want to remember. Months later, during the second road trip, I interviewed Evelyn E. Nettles, Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs at Tennessee State University, whose relatives had migrated from Mississippi to Nashville. When I mentioned the movie, she said, I had not heard of the Green Book until I saw the movie, and I'm an educated black woman. Her statement echoed my own thoughts when I had first read about the travel guide on that flight to London. So, the movie, having used the travel guide's name as its title and having included disturbing scenes during the tour through the South, did have a benefit. It made more people aware of, and some even curious about, the historic publication and the period in the United States that made it a travel necessity. It's clear from the conversations I've had that more people recognize the name of the publication founded by Victor Hugo Green solely because of the movie. In this book, I share with you my journey with the Green Book. In truth, I feel I should use the plural journeys because in each chapter because each chapter the people I met offer the stories of their lived experiences as African Americans in different states, cities, and towns when the travel guide was being published. I want you to learn from their journeys too, what they have seen, heard, felt, and sensed during the many incidents of what can be graciously described as rich experiences. These witnesses knew good times and brutal times. During these journeys, I have been educated by elders and contemporaries about so much U.S. history that I didn't know. These people I visited are those who lived it and whose experiences historians largely have left uninvestigated. I heard about the many black streets and neighborhoods, often called Little Harlems, that provided safe harbors and places of pride and joy for travelers passing through, as well as for local residents. I learned the names of black visionaries with access to capital in various cities who created legendary businesses, the Gotham Hotel in Detroit, the Mance Hotel in Cincinnati, the Booker T Motel in Humboldt, Tennessee, also famous for its barbecue, the Benmore Hotel in Montgomery, Alabama, and activists whose courageous work challenged and defied the restrictions and stereotypes of that time. Person after person recounted stories about traveling on highways, driving along hometown streets that were frightening, sad, noble, defiant, and funny. I still marvel at how black people lived through such difficult, mean-spirited times and maintained their hope and positivity. There are also other journeys less obviously contained in this book, personal ones. I was born in the early 1950s in the segregated rural South. Janae Woods Weber, who traveled with me and is biracial, was born in the late 1970s in a largely white suburb in Massachusetts. And Kimmy, another companion on the journey, who was a first-generation Nigerian American immigrant, was born in the 1990s in the United Kingdom and lived for a few years in Nigeria before moving to Illinois, where she grew up. As Janae astutely observed, Alvin, Kimmy, and I are different generations and were raised in different parts of the country by families that were quite different from one another. So even though we share some mutual ideas and understanding about American black culture, our approaches to the road trip and how we contextualized what we discovered through the interviews were impacted by our varying life experiences. This was true intellectually and emotionally. Often our often our discussions in the car started with a question, not directed at anyone, just spoken aloud. We'd put a subject into the air for us to think about and comment on, such as, is it possible for us today to feel what black people, especially a black family with children, felt traveling during segregation? What would be your worry if we had a flat tire or car trouble on a two-lane road in the 1940s, 50s, or 60s? Imagine what a sense of relief you would have if not one of the things you worried about occurred during your entire trip. Do the fears created by the incidents caused by driving while black ever go away? How long do the cumulative traumas last? What are you learning about yourself? And how did the personal story we just heard during our interview affect you? What did the story make you feel about America? I share more of these questions in this book. Other times, we'd ask one another questions as if we were interviewing each other. We all grew as the miles, the stories, the events, and the insights accumulated. There were times in our adventure when I experienced the truth in Baldwin's quotation that you cannot know what you find on the journey will do to you. Sometimes a person's story and their telling of it unexpectedly connected deeply with my own history growing up in the rural, segregated South and worshiping in a Baptist church. The person's voice, accent, and cadence were like hearing a spiritual or the humming of a gospel song I had known since the time I could feel music. I struggled to maintain my professional demeanor during many of the conversations. I simply had no emotion barrier against or filter for what that person was saying or how they were saying it. Their words washed through every fiber of my being. Amazingly, virtually every person, with without my asking, connected their past experiences to current events. They just did it seamlessly. I understand and, most important, received the wisdom and insights these generous people were passing along to me about driving as well as living while black in America then and now. I will be generous in sharing with you, the reader of this book, as the people I talked with were generous with me. I know they want me to pass on their wisdom. Alvin Hall, New York City, 2023. This book was written in 2023. The new year just began, so I'm going to say it was 2 years ago. Or you just said it's 2026, so 3 years ago. But that's the introduction. We're gonna start on chapter 1 tomorrow. I think that was like 20 minutes, but I'm gonna put however long it was. And so yeah, man. The Green Book, Driving the Green Book by Alvin Hall. Yes, sir.